Alright, so I'm recording this basically just so I can upload it into the Patreon real fast. It's not projection wise per se, but I just wanted to post this because this is my thoughts. I doubt anybody's really going to see this before the race since it starts in like 7 hours or whatnot. So this is an example of when I fully believe that projections don't matter. Um, I mean, clearly this is like my sheet that I use and whatnot. I'm not worried about. I will worry about teammate points, but that's not going to be projected into here. That's something you should be doing in your head. I'm not concerned about the finishing positions. I just need to determine who's in the points. The reason why I'm saying this is, in terms of building for the contest, let's focus in on where I believe people should finish really fast. This is not necessarily what their project points are. I just need to. I do this to have an understanding of where they're most likely going to be, in my opinion, up front. So Verstappen, Perez, clearly the two guys who are probably going to compete for the win. It could be either one of those guys. It'll just depend on who you're chasing the captain. Typically, if you're chasing Verstappen, if you're chasing Perez, if you're chasing Leclerc, you're most likely putting them in the captain, um, and you'd be overweight there. Or if you like him enough and you are using a cheaper guy, you're going to put him in the driver's seat, whatever the case may be. Leclerc, Verstappen, Perez are probably the contenders for the win. I would lean more to Verstappen and Perez than Leclerc. Leclerc is struggling in long run speeds, just how it is. Verstappen or Perez would most likely overtake him at some point. However, he is way cheaper than them. So that's the first step if we're deciding to go in that direction. Where I think this slate really turns interesting is, and let me go ahead and I have this in my Dover thing. Let me go ahead and so when we look at the teams here, this is where clearly we're not playing two guys on the same team. When we start building lines, and I'm gonna do this on the side so I can talk through what I'm looking at here. When we're looking at Haas, as I said, as I predicted, or as I think, we're gonna have one of the Haas guys be optimal. It's most likely going to be Magnussen over Nico, just because Magnussen is probably he's regardless. It's whoever gets the points gets a teammate bonus. That's just what it is. As I said, you should be capable. You should calculate it's not necessarily related to the points. It's related to how you're constructing your lineup. It's most likely to be Magnussen as the guy who gets in. I would still, and I'm still going to build lineups with Hulkenberg in there, but Magnussen gives you a huge discount in price, and I assume the ownership is going to go to Magnussen. That's just how it is. In terms of everybody else back in the cheap areas with the AlphaTauri guys, Nick is the only way Nick works is if Sonoda wrecks out. Okay, Sonoda does not have to be in the points. I just gave him 11th for me to have an idea of where I think he's going to be. I think Sonoda falls out of the points, so it is 5 points going to Sonoda over Nick. Nick will most likely finish 18th, 17th, 16th if we have issues, unless he is a wreck. But outside of that, Sonoda should get the bonus point from that. And so when we're looking at who we're using, in my opinion, we're removing these two drivers. Okay, so we're lower in the pool already between our four drivers, not including captain, not including constructor. It's leaning towards possibly, and you can even look at Sargent as well. But Sargent will most likely lose the 5 points to Albon. So when we're looking at this in terms of in terms of constructing lineups. Now I'm going to probably I haven't made my lines yet. I'm still gonna have these guys in line just as one-offs in case the fucking other dude wrecks or some shit. But for the most part, it is Magnussen, it is Albon, and it is Tsunoda for the possible value plays in the bottom of this tier. Now, when we're looking at that, Magnussen's 3-4, Sonoda's 4, um, and Albon is 48. So, unless we see Albon finish in the points, which it can happen. There is a chance he could finish ninth. We've seen him run better this year. We've seen that he has speed. I am concerned about that. He is most likely to need help to do that with people wrecking out or whatever. Once we get past that, the question then comes related to regardless of who you're using, Leclerc, Verstappen, Perez. I'm going to use Verstappen for this example in the captain position. So you put Verstappen in the captain. With Magnussen in there, clearly you're going to run whatever constructor is tied to your guy. Verstappen, Magnussen, Red Bull leaves you $3,900 for your remaining drivers. That leads you towards Logan Sargent. So you would need Albon to either wreck out, or you need Albon to wreck out because Sargent's not going to beat him head up. Nick is not going to beat Tsunoda head up. Hulkenberg is not going to lean towards, or he's not going to beat Magnussen heads up. So if you're going with a Verstappen captain, and I view this as somebody who I have 12 lines reserved right now. I'm probably going to throw 20 at it and probably have 4 different captains that I play 5 lines with. If I'm doing a Verstappen captain, that means if that lineup is optimal, you need one of these guys in red who theoretically shouldn't get there, but you are forced to play them if you go Verstappen. And like I said, I like Magnussen the most if we're needing money, which, as I said, Baku is a really, really treacherous track. We're going to have a lot of contact. We have a high possibility of wrecks. So I believe anybody is out there. But for this example, if I was going to go Verstappen, I would probably run Magnussen, and I would probably want to go. You're probably forced to go to Tsunoda. I would probably go Sargent. So Verstappen, Magnussen, Tsunoda, Sargent. But then you're forced to go with Zhao in that line, which I don't necessarily like. Here, I'll show you what I mean here. I mean, you could argue we're building lines, whatever the case may be. You would end up going Zhao here. I don't believe that is going to be optimal. Okay, because we're missing out on the points. We need people to have points. That's just what it is. So if you fill this lineup out with Zhao, even if you're switching Magnussen out for Hulkenberg or whatever the case may be, we're not able to get to the people that are actually going to be optimal, the people that are actually going to score points. You need to have when you're building F1 lines, you need to have people who are going to finish in the points. So, kind of going through this shows to me that a Verstappen lineup, if Verstappen is optimal, I think it's negative EV. I don't think it's worth playing a Verstappen optimal lineup because you're forced to go to shitty people. I don't even think that's optimal with these scrubs down here. I don't believe that's optimal, and I believe that is a waste of a lineup. Okay, so at this point, at least for me, I've determined that Verstappen captains are just not gonna. I'm not gonna waste my time playing them. Okay. So what do we do now? Okay. Now that we've yet again going on the same things that we've identified here. If you're using Verstappen, you need to have, Sargent, Hulkenberg, Nick. You need their teammate to run to trouble, which is kind of a stretch, or you're gonna need stuff to happen. I don't like the way the Verstappen line goes. You're going to have a lot of duplicated lineups if people are playing the way they should with Verstappen and Red Bull and the captain and the constructor. I don't necessarily like that. So I view this as Verstappen captain is not where I want to go. That's not what I want to use my time. That's not what I want to end up doing. Let me go ahead and tell these guys I'm making an let me see, sorry. For what it's worth. Now that we understand that Verstappen, I don't want a Verstappen captain. We can approach this 2 ways in terms of game theory. Verstappen still wins. You either want, which I would honestly probably prioritize Red Bull as the constructor, because that 50 points they're going to score is way more important than the 25 whatever Perez is going to score. So we're looking at a Verstappen driver position being optimal. We're looking at possibly Red Bull constructor. We're looking at a possible Mercedes and a possible Ferrari. Those are the only three that could realistically work, and I think it's going to be Red Bull. Now, if one of the Red Bull drivers runs into an issue, it would then default to Ferrari, whatever the case may be. That situation where you're probably going to want some Ferrari constructor lineups in there. But Verstappen driver, so we've determined that. So we've determined 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. One of the 6 positions in the lineup, which is Verstappen. We've most likely determined that the constructor is going to be Red Bull, possibly Ferrari, but for the most part, it's probably going to be Red Bull, because you're going to have both the drivers in the top 3 for the majority of the race. You're going to most likely have them have the fast lap. You're most likely going to have them lead the most amount of laps, regardless if it's Verstappen, Perez, whatever the case may be. So, who is the who's the captain that we're looking for? Now, just going off of finishing value, not going off of anything else, not going off of teammate value, because we've already determined kind of what our value ranges that we're using are. Who fits here? Who is probably going to be a contender for points, a contender to beat their teammate, and a contender to score a lot of points? There's 2 people that I view here that are worth looking at, okay? And that's Sainz and that's Russell, okay? Russell's starting outside the top 10. He's going to finish in the points. We know that for sure. We know he's going to gain positions, okay? What he does in terms of scoring will depend on what Hamilton does, okay? If he can beat Hamilton, I think George has a real chance of being the optimal captain in this race if Hamilton runs into issue. So, for me, I'm going to build some lineups that have Russell captain, Verstappen driver, Red Bull constructor, and yet again, you have to go into a pretty shitty range. We're stuck playing fucking Magnussen and shit like that anyway. Actually, you're stuck playing. You still need shitty guys to play with, which is fine. Whatever. We've got a real chance of having carnage and stuff. But Russell makes sense. Sainz is the same argument. More expensive. You're stuck playing quote unquote bad players. So the third way that I view this race is, which is the second way that I would attempt because I'm not using the Verstappen captain, is a cheap captain. Okay? Who is in a situation that can be optimal, who is cheap? Okay? Looking at the grid, Tsunoda, if he can stay in the points, or just beat his teammate. Which we're typically looking for somebody who's going to finish in the points if we're playing them in the value range as the captain. So Tsunoda makes sense. Albon, possibly. I think that's a stretch, but Tsunoda makes a lot of sense. Albon makes a lot of sense, specifically when you look at positive EV lines versus the field. Tsunoda and Albon, in my opinion, probably make the most sense there in terms of value ranges, in terms of value plays. You can look at Leclerc as well. I know going back to the Russell point, but you're in the same position. Actually, you cannot work Leclerc, Verstappen, and Magnussen. You don't have enough money there. So the people that I've identified as people that I would look in the captain range that I will build with going forward, because I don't see myself not following this, is probably going to be these 3 drivers here. Let me just look through this again. Based on probably too expensive. Hamilton, I don't see him winning the race. I don't see him doing anything. I think the only play with a Mercedes is George Russell or bust. Alonso is going to be beat his teammate. Stroll is probably not going to beat Alonso. That's just how it is. You can go, I mean, possibly Stroll. Let me look what that does. He's 99. Okay. Stroll would certainly be loaned. Stroll could possibly be there. But I think based on trying to get more people who are going to finish near the point cutoff, I think it makes sense with an Albon, with a Sonoda, with a Sainz captain. I think that's where I'm at. Even possibly, it actually, thirdly, probably Magnussen. That's a long way to go, 18th to 10th. But if Magnussen, first off, beats teammate, you need that first and foremost. If Magnussen can get in the points, they're. Damn, dude, that Red Bull constructor is tough as fuck. Is Ferrari going to work? Interesting. So, where I'm at, as I'm just kind of talking through this stuff, it is these probably 4 drivers that I will use in the captain position, just because this race is kind of fluky, it's kind of funky and stuff. High upside for people wrecking out. I think it opens the door for a wild captain to work out. And I will probably only use Red Bull and Ferrari. I'm probably going to have 60% Red Bull, 40% Ferrari. But that is how I would approach this F1 race. And I think that is what I am going to do. Those are my thoughts, my opinions, and I'm going to move on from there because this is a race where I don't want to be duplicated. I think the opportunity is there to have lineups that aren't duplicated as nearly as much by building around these 4 drivers. So yeah, hopefully maybe this helps you out. Maybe it doesn't. I just want to make this for people on Patreon as I kind of talk through stuff. So I will see you guys in the chat or whatever. See you guys later.